in terms of the didactic part of it. Obviously, we are trying to connect all the 24 sessions we've had so far and see how we can put it together, if we can make sense of all of them simultaneously. Clearly, we can't do justice to every single session which happened there, but we'll try and cover most of the important concepts and then kind of give it a quick overview so we sort of know where it all falls in place. It so happened that this morning I was talking to a doctor, and it was on some other topic, and we were asking him for suggestions and ideas and everything else. So he said he gave us this reference and that reference and that reference and read this. And one point he mentioned, which I really stuck to my head, and I said I'm going to mention that this afternoon, is he said, don't think of it as contents, but think of it as some kind of a toolkit for us to be able to live life in a different way. He said he's a cancer survivor. And he was saying, you know, the first thing after I got diagnosed with cancer, I went and told my wife, he's 8 years old, went and told my wife saying that the life as we know it till now is finished. Okay, we are dead. That particular person is dead. Now we have to start a new life all over again and think of it like a rebirth and start all over again. It's kind of made me relate to some of these ideas, saying that, you know, if you think of it only intellectually, some of these ideas, well, they still make sense, but they're just intellectual. But the whole idea of Yogakshema is to try and see, can we convert some of those intellectual ideas into actions so that it can enrich our lives, it can make our lives a lot better than, or whatever we want it to be. That's really the whole idea. If you look at Yogakshema's core purpose, this is what we have as a sort of a stated purpose internally, saying that how do we improve the quality of lives of people by improving the quality of mind. Okay, so obviously it's not about knowledge and all that in the quality of mind, in terms of bringing about that sense of self-awareness and bringing about visibility to things which are otherwise hidden. They're there somewhere subliminally, but to bring it to the surface and discuss those things openly in a small group where we have enough trust which is built. That's really what it is. Now, if you recall, this is where we started. This is where we started more than a year back. Okay, the place where we started was saying, do these things lead to higher quality of life? Let us say we become a graduate, or we go up the ladder, or there's a pay jump, holiday, shopping, house, car. Do these things contribute to quality of life? The answer to that is yes. Every one of them add to the quality of life. Okay, if we get an additional degree, if we get a pay jump, there is a sense of well-being which happens. If we have a holiday, we get a new home, all of those create joy. All of them lead to higher quality of life. However, there is one problem with this. One, it's an external stimuli, and two is they are habituating, in the sense that once we have got the pay jump and we get the 15%, within a month and a half, or 2 months, we would have forgotten about it, and we are looking for the next dose of the same medicine or the next dose of the same drug. So they are habituating, and like every other habit, we need a larger dose of it every time for us to get the same amount of gratification. That's as far as external quality of life is concerned, but they are very, very important and very powerful quality of life contributors, all of these things. The second is really the quality of life internal. The quality of life internal is the deep sense of well-being all of us know. So we are trying to put it in a set of words like deeper sense of joy, fulfillment, peace, vitality, optimism, and so on. But we kind of know when we are feeling that. Okay, there are times when we deeply feel that we are having a very fulfilling experience as we go through a certain kind of work. We have a very fulfilling experience when we work with a set of people, or we do a certain project. While we are physically tired, at the end of the day, we are mentally charged and looking forward to the next day. That usually means you've had an exceptionally high quality of internal quality of life on that particular day. And if you can sustain that day after day after day, is all we aspire for. So the trick is, how do we get both the external conditions and the internal conditions come together so that it leads us to have better external functioning in our professional life, in our personal life, and also good internal functioning. Okay, that's where we were. Now, all of this is straightforward. In the sense, we kind of know that if you are able to get some of those external qualities of life, and if you're able to develop compassion, if you're able to develop optimism and vitality and energy and a sense of peace and fulfillment, then we will have a much better quality of life. Why doesn't it happen, or why is it a struggle sometimes, is because of the following. What happens when it comes to journey of life is we get educated, we go through school, we become knowledgeable, then we go and take up a job, and we gain experience through that particular thing. During the whole process, we also lock ourselves into preset mental processes and patterns. We develop ideas about right and wrong very strongly. We develop ideas about what is important or what is not important very, very strongly. So we get ourselves into mental processes. It could be about a group of people. It could be about a certain department within our organizations. It could be about our relationship with an individual in our personal life. All of those get locked into very strong preset processes and patterns. And those patterns, even if you are not going through the experience one more time, just thinking about that experience one more time hardens it. The reason being that every thought we have is real. That means chemicals are secreted every time we go through the thought. So we have a bad experience with a certain individual, and we think about it one more time, that experience gets worse. And we think about it one more time, it gets worse. Okay, and it keeps going on because every time negative chemicals are secreted in our brain when we think about that particular negative experience. Remember, the experience is only once, but the amount of times we replay that in our head could be many times, and that leads to the hardening. Once that hardening has happened, the mind is imprisoned. Okay, then we are locked into that preset pattern, and we kind of get, and with passage of time, we become older and we start thinking we actually know what it is. We know that this is the wrong group or the wrong department or the wrong person or good and bad, and all those kinds of things start coming into play, and we get into a loop which is called survive. Okay, where the general sense of exploration, curiosity, optimism, vitality, fulfillment, and that whole thing kind of goes off, and we just go from one day to another, and that's what we call as survive. And our promise was that we can break this cycle. Okay, and every person can break this cycle. Not by knowing what all it contributes to that cycle, but to try and explore ways in which we can break that cycle, to be able to take some of these ideas which we have spoken about, apply it in our own lives, and see how it responds. So that's about creating that self-awareness, understanding our mind. So how do we create a higher quality of life? By creating a higher quality of our own mind itself, is what the purpose of this particular set of sessions is as well. So where we went through a whole bunch of things, started with leadership, on neuroscience concepts, self-empowerment, interpersonal relationship. Then we moved into another 12 sessions on Excel, which was again a bunch of neuroscience concepts, quite different from the first set. And then Anita had taken us through life positions and strokes. And after that, we went through excellence, the 7S model, and so on and so forth. And we are at this point where we have got all these all these multiple concepts in our head. Now, I want you to do this quick exercise in your head and want you to remember the following 10 words. Of understanding, absorption, learning, usage, enables, and all that. Okay. Now, if you were to recall all these 10 words, I'm sure we'll all remember 5 or 6, in some cases 7, but not all the 10. Okay. I'm going to rearrange the same 10 words and put it like this. Better structuring enables greater absorption, understanding, and usage of learning. So what we are trying to do here is not to really come up with some fantastic ideas which are not known to anybody. What we are doing is the wisdom which is out there, we are bringing it, distilling it, and converting it into a usable form so that we can apply it on our own lives. We are just converting data into knowledge. That's the way I want you to see the following 1 hour. What we have done so far, okay? Let's put it in a quick matrix and say on the x-axis, we have internal and external. On the y-axis, we have personal and professional. So there are some ideas we have which are internal personal development ideas. There are some which are internal, which is from the self, and professional ideas. There are some which are external personal ideas and some which are external professional ideas. So if you see internal personal ideas, we spoke about belief system, what are values, beliefs, morals, ethics. What is perception? How do we form perception? How do we shape perception? How do we change perception? Automatic negative thoughts, about mindset, fixed mindset, growth mindset, about various cognitive biases. We took 3 or 4, which we felt were quite important, and about habits. Then personal, external, which is our interpersonal relationship. How do we find our flow and be in the flow? What is Ikigai? How do we get to a Ikigai? Then we have professional, internal, which is about in our professional life, how do we manage our stress? How do we keep our critical thinking intact? How do we manage our time? As leaders, how do we set vision? And very, very importantly, how do we walk the talk when it comes to shared values? And professional external is about how do we create trust, empathy, and teamwork? How do we communicate effectively? Strategy, structure, systems, shared values, and IPR. Now, I don't want you to overthink in terms of these neat little boxes I've placed them in. There are things which could be what is a part of a blue box, sometimes it's in the yellow box, something in the yellow box could be in the green box, and so on. But this is just to give a broad framework and a structure. Like we said, those 10 words which you have to remember, just think of it in this kind of a framework so that it fits into our head. That's all. And all of this, like Intel Inside, is run by that one big chip, which is inside of all of us, which is our brain. And we are going to enable the neuroplasticity of our brain to be able to manage all these things, to be able to evolve through all these things. And the tool we are going to use is neuroplasticity. And the way we will apply neuroplasticity is called neurosculpting. So essentially, it's about understanding ourselves, and that would mean we have to understand our brain. If you understand who we are through our brain, if you understand how we think, if you understand our biases, if you understand our habits, if you understand our negative thoughts, and so on and so forth, greater and greater understanding of ourselves will happen. So neurosculpting is simply using that important concept called neuroplasticity, which is a proven scientific concept that the brain continues to form new connections every day. And you can encourage the brain to form certain types of connections. And you can also ensure that your brain erases some of the earlier connections which are there. That's a proven concept, which is called neuroplasticity. Now, applying that concept to slowly chip away, one by one, forming new connections every day, thereby sculpting a new brain, is all about this process of evolving. So let's spend some time on each of these four boxes. The first of them is personal internal. In personal internal, it is about values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes. To refresh, values are what are important to us. Whatever is important is of value. This is a value I hold very dearly. Honesty is important to me. Not lying is important to me. Being trustworthy is important to me. Those are all your values. Beliefs, on the other hand, is something you think is right. What you take to be right, what you take to be true. Belief is something, what you think is true, what you take to be true is a belief. I think this person is like this is your belief. Okay, that's not a fact. That's my belief that that person is like this. And I might have very good reasons to believe that, because that will come through a certain experience, through multiple transactions I might have gone through with that particular person. Once I've gone through multiple transactions with a person, I form a belief. A belief is a good thing to have, but only remember that a belief means once you harden it, even if new transactions are happening, which are contraindicators to your pre-existing belief, you will still not be able to change your belief, because the belief becomes a very hardened item. So therefore, it is important to be supple in our beliefs. Values can be a little harder, but we have to be slightly moldable when it comes to beliefs. We can't have beliefs which are so hard that we are not able to experience our life fully. We are not able to go through more transactions in our life which have greater fulfillment, because the beliefs will harden, the beliefs will stop us from getting the fullest out of that experience. Third is the morals. Morals are things what I believe to be right. It's not correct for children to do this. That's a moral. It is not correct for a person to be doing that or to be behaving in a certain way. Those are all morals. And finally, attitude is how I present myself. Now, when it comes to values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes, the first thing to really appreciate and understand is there is no universality to it. I was reading somewhere recently where it says that Egypt, if somebody invites you for dinner and you're having a wonderful dinner, and one of the items is a little low on salt, and you ask somebody, can you pass the salt shaker? It is considered rude. It's considered extremely rude for you to ask for a salt shaker and add more salt to the food which is served to you. We might find it extremely confusing and say, what is the big deal about asking salt? But that's the cultural context in which it is set. I'm sure there are lots of things which we all truly believe in, and somebody else will find it extremely strange that we believe in something which is way off some of the beliefs. So the trick is not about my belief is better or your belief is better or you're better in this one or that one. It's to just get that appreciation that there is nothing universal about values, beliefs, morals, and attitude. And just like I'm shaped by my experience, my emotions, my socioeconomic background, my educational background, just the way it has shaped my values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes, somebody else's values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes is shaped by their education, experience, socioeconomic condition, the society they live in, and their emotional experience they go through. Okay, that creates the openness. I've given it a lot of thought, and I've carefully written this point even earlier and now, is a large part of dissonance. Whether our dissonance with our society, with our family, with our profession, with our colleagues arise out of differences in values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes. Try to tone down your values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes. I'm not saying get it to immoral. So it's not a black and white situation. Right? So we are not saying that, oh, this is my moral, so that means what you're suggesting is we become immoral. We're not saying immoral. your understanding of what is moral, your understanding of what you take to be true, or your understanding of what you take to be right, your understanding of what you take to be important, if we can slowly shape that and become open-minded about it, then these dissonances start reducing and we can take in the new transactions fully. Otherwise, we have to take it through a filter. We have no other choice. Just this recognition, even if we don't pull it down, just the recognition of the non-universality of values, beliefs, morals, and ethics will make a profound change in ourselves, which will lead to greater acceptance and will become less judgmental about people. Okay, and these people could be anything. Are people who touch our personal lives, people who are a part of a society, people who be policemen are all like this. Okay, any of those things. Okay, all of those will slowly soften, which means every transaction becomes a fresh new transaction, and we have no baggage which we are carrying as we enter that particular transaction, as little baggage as possible. I mean, let's not kid ourselves, there will still be baggage, but we'll try and minimize the baggage we carry when we enter a new transaction. All right. Then the other idea about internal personal is the idea of perception. Perception is said it many times, saying there is a reality which is out there. No one can see the reality as it is. What we can see is our understanding of that reality. Our understanding of a reality is called perception. Okay, there are very, very few, when it comes to human interactions, there are very, very few objective realities. What we have is a subjective reality. It is a reality as I see it. But when I see it, I have to necessarily send it through various filters. The filters I have are, it has to come through one of my 5 senses. I either have to taste it or touch it or smell it or hear it, or one of those senses. I have to go through one of those senses. And then immediately it gets filtered through my pre-existing values, beliefs, morals, and ethics. And then I perceive that reality as I see it. All right. So we have a reality and we sense it. We have to send it through the filters. And now the view I have to it is my perception. Just like values, beliefs, morals, and ethics, just to understand, what I'm seeing is not reality. What I'm seeing is my perception of the reality, again, will make us understand other people better, which would mean that we will find a lot of common ground where we can potentially meet. The cycle of perception works something like this. The cycle is, it starts with the reality, and then our perception of the reality. Now, once we have perceived that reality, what we have is my truth. But somewhere along the line, my truth gets approximated to a fact. And therefore, when we look at a reality, we are thinking that we are seeing an objective reality. Fact is objective. Truth is subjective. So what I think is I have an objective reality. And therefore, if somebody else says, this is what I saw in the situation, and you say, how can you do that? How can you say that? I mean, I was there very much. You were, of course, there, but it went through your senses in a certain way. You probably heard some, didn't hear everything. You saw some, didn't hear everything. Or you saw everything and heard everything, but you sent it through a moral filter and a value filter and a belief filter, which finally led to a certain perception of what happened there. So what we see is never a fact, it's always our subjective truth. But if we approximate it to a fact, that's the way we experience it. And that experience gets stored in our memory. And the next time around, when we see reality, that memory, that whole, the neural pathway which we have created will now form the basis on which we can perceive anything else, which means we are just continuously increasing the tint of our glass, so to speak. Every time we go through a new experience, we are increasing the tint of the glass. Okay. And therefore, we move farther and farther away from the truth. Now, there are two ways to break this cycle. The two ways to break the cycle are, first, changing our perception. Okay. Change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. The second is about taking in the reality as fully as we can. So changing perception is about, moving from saying her behavior is unreasonable, to say what is probably making her unreasonable. Try and ask the question saying that, okay, I probably think it is unreasonable, but there's something which must be triggering. If the person is, a decent person, and then what is making her unreasonable? If a child is not attentive in class, we can immediately say this is the problem with children of this age, or we can say this is a problem with this particular child, or whatever it is. But we can go back and ask this question saying, what is making the child sleepy in class, or unattentive in class, or any of those things? So we can change our perception from one to the other. If you change the way you look at things, Wayne Dyer's statement, the things you look at will change. Developing that particular way of thinking is about changing our perception. The second way to break the perception cycle is to take in the reality fully. Taking in reality fully is about mindfulness. It's about being in the present, being in the moment all the time, most of the time, okay? Fully immersed in it without judgment. What mindfulness does is that it creates a gap. It creates a space between a strong emotion and our actions. It gives that small amount of space between a strong emotion and our actions. That way, we learn to deal with positive or negative emotions a lot more calmly, and we end up making much better decisions. When we pay attention to our thoughts and feelings, we can respond in a lot more thought out manner. We don't have to either hurt our feelings or the feelings of others, because the response is more deliberate, and it is not an immediate quick reply, but it's a more thought out response which we have to the situation, which, if we are not hurting ourselves or the others, it will create more emotional balance. And even at times when we fall down, it will be a lot faster and a lot quicker for us to get up from that falling down. So those are the two tiny tricks when it comes to perception. Okay, so we, as a cognitive behavior training, sometimes it's a good idea to really strongly form a certain perception and then put it to test. And now put it upside down and imagine the whole thing which we believe in is not true, and it's the exact opposite. So somebody we don't really trust, and somebody with whom we have had multiple bad transactions. It could be a relationship in our personal life, professional life, and to say that I'm going to try and do cognitive behavior training by completely transforming that perception and say that I'm going to look at this whole situation completely differently. And I'm going to soak in the reality fully, which means I'm suspending all my belief systems about that particular person and thinking of it new, afresh, and see what happens. Sometimes, at least for me, sometimes these have had profound changes, because you're able to accept a person and be able to see that person in a very, very different light as compared to the way we've been seeing that particular person or that group of people. Then we had the automatic negative thoughts. Now, automatic negative thoughts, as we know, we get something like, I think, 70,000 thoughts in a day. And out of those 70,000 thoughts, 80% of those thoughts are negative thoughts, and many of them are repeated thoughts. Okay, so these involuntary negative thoughts are called automatic negative thoughts. Now, these thoughts are not 70,000 disjointed thoughts. They are not independent 70,000 thoughts. We'll go crazy if it's like that. What happens is we get a thought And if the thought is a negative thought, it plays in our mind one more time. Then it plays in our mind one more time. Anxiety, stress, any of those things. What is anxiety? It's just playing it again and again and again and again. That makes us anxious about facing a situation. We are going for an interview. The interview itself is going to happen for 15, 20, 30 minutes. But during the preparation for the interview, I might not get this job. I think somebody else is even more qualified. I don't think I'm prepared. What if you ask the question like this? That kind of thing, that kind of thought process, and it repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. That repetition is what we're calling as the and breeding. And breeding basically means the thought is going on again and again and again and again. The chemical is secreted one time, twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and it becomes a negative feeling because the chemical has started moving through our body. It's physically a chemical, yeah? So it's beginning to move through our body, through our nervous system, which leads to negative feeling. Negative feeling, okay, you can think of it like food, right? If you have just eaten a lot and you say, no, I don't want it anymore, you can't stop it. I mean, it has to digest what is there. So similarly, feelings, once the chemicals are secreted and started moving through your body, they're going to stay in your body for a very long period of time. They will eventually get flushed out, but they will stay in your body for a much longer period of time. And the negative feeling is the reality with which we will be viewing new transactions, which means it is going through the filter of a negative feeling. And therefore, we'll see it necessarily, we'll always see even good things in a slightly bleaker form than they are. So this is a cycle. And once the cycle continues, we become that. It shapes our personality. So who is this person? The person is a negative person. Okay. Always pessimistic, always thinking about the worst, always suspecting other people's intent, and all of those things. Amongst all the ants, there are many ants we spoke about. Amongst all the ants, we said 2 of them are very, very powerful ants. One of them is blaming, the other one is defending. They're actually 2 sides of the same coin. Blaming is our inability to take accountability for something which has gone wrong. So therefore, we look outside and say, I did everything right, but because of that particular person, because of that particular situation, because of that particular COVID, because of my management, because of my colleagues, because of the principal who was before me, is all about blaming. The second one is about defending and saying, no, I did it perfectly right, and not willing to take responsibility for a mistake. These are absolutely killer traits when it comes to leadership. Killer in the sense, these traits will kill a leader. Taking accountability is one of the key things of a leader, even if the mistake is not yours directly. Remember the Abdul Kalam Satish Dhawan example. Even if the mistake is not yours directly, leaders always take responsibility for things which have not gone right. They will own up and say, it's my mistake, end of the day, one form or the other. So what do ants do to us? When we look at our past, we look at it and say, you know, I could have done this, I should have done that. If I'd taken computer science and done this, if I'd done this, if I'd taken medicine, I should have become a doctor, I should have become this, all of that. It's about regrets and lost opportunities. The current is unsatisfactory, and the future is obviously filled with anxiety and pessimism. This is what ants do to us. And we can break the cycle because we know that most ants are false. That's a fact. So next time you get an ant, we know what the antidote is, which is the antidote is really to rethink and say that most ants are false, which means the current thought I'm going through as a negative thought is false as well. And if you still don't want to, because the risk is you might go into a false positive. That's not the idea. The idea is to understand that that particular thought is false. Okay. False positive is a problem by itself. Don't get into false positive and say, no, everything will go right in life and all that. And I will just go do my prayers or something like that. Everything will shape up. It doesn't. None of those things will happen. Prayers are good and important, but they have a role to play. But there is no replacement for our own effort. So most ants are indeed false. The best way to check it is when you get an ant, write it down, come back a few days later and check for yourself whether it turned out to be true or turned out to be false. Then mindset. Mindset is the way we orient. How do we look at things when things are happening? What is the way in which we look at things is about mindset. How do we handle situations comes from our mindset. So how do we sort out things when something is going on? Okay, we expected somebody to come as a chief guest for a program, and that chief guest in the last minute has cancelled. Okay, we don't know what to do. Now, how do we handle a situation like that? Mindset will guide the way we go about handling something like that. At a slightly meta level, mindset helps us spot opportunities and excel as an individual. People with a certain type of mindset only get to see opportunities. Okay, I don't know if you know this wonderful experiment, which a group of students, I think, was told they were given a newspaper. Okay, a newspaper which is printed in college. They were given a newspaper and they said in one of the advertisements, it is written that you will receive 100 rupees or $100 or something like that. Once you spot that particular advertisement, go and take it to your, the person at the head of the room and then hand it over to them. They'll pay you the $100. Okay. On the first page, in big bold letters, it was written in the newspaper saying that don't bother with the $100. Just take the newspaper back to the person. Here is your $500 or something like that was written. Okay. And nobody could really see that because they were still looking for something else. Okay. Once we know what we are looking for, we get fixated on that, and then we can't look for things outside of it. Okay. That comes from a fixed mindset as well. Now, these things trap us in self-defeating cycles. Okay. And yeah, so there are certain things which distinguish people from people who have one type of mindset or another type of mindset, which we all know is a growth mindset and the fixed mindset. One clarification which we keep giving at this place is a fixed mindset is not being stubborn. Fixed mindset is not about being unwilling to change. That is being obstinate. That's being stubborn. That is not fixed mindset. Fixed mindset is a belief that the amount of brains a person has is a fixed quantity and it does not change over time. That means at a very early age, I can say whether a person is smart or not smart, or intelligent or not intelligent. I can say all of those things. And I believe that quantity doesn't change over time. That strong belief is called a fixed mindset, that I believe the intelligence is a fixed quantity. And if the intelligence is a fixed quantity, then I keep defending it. In every situation, in every transaction, I have to appear smart only then. Because why? Because my intelligence is a limited quantity and I have to appear smart. Whereas it's a growth mindset thinks of all these things like intelligence and smarts and all those things as necessary but not sufficient conditions. It is your transactions, it is your experiences, it is your exposure which continues to grow your brain, continues to grow your intelligence and everything else over a period of time, and the brain continues to grow all the way till the day we die. So there are 7 points on excellence mindset, which we won't go into the details. They were: 1, having a strong purpose and passion. The second is our resilience. Third is the optimism. Fourth is self-awareness, perseverance, embracing failure. Okay. We ask this question, what is the opposite of success? The opposite of success is not failure. The opposite of success is giving up. Failure is a part of success. It's a subset of the success process. Success process contains multiple failures and a few successes. Giving up is the opposite of that. And finally, an important thing for all leaders is simply refusing to point fingers at anybody else. It's a bit of a struggle because many times you'll say, but it's not my mistake end of the day. But refusing to blame is a tremendous attitude you can develop for yourself, where I just refuse to blame. The bus came late, I don't blame it. There was a traffic jam, no problem. It started raining, it was an unseasonal rain, not an issue. All of those things. It's if something went wrong, right, that whole sense of accountability, saying I'm in charge, really empowers us. And that's what we call as prosper. Yeah. Resilience, perseverance, optimism, and not blaming, all of these are deliberate processes, and therefore they come from the higher center. If you're not deliberate about it, we cannot develop these qualities. They are not automatic qualities. Then in internal personal, we haven't gone to the other three boxes. In internal personal, we have cognitive bias. Cognitive bias, cognition is how do we perceive, understand, interpret, and understand a situation. When we do that, we always think in terms of patterns. We are very, very different from the computers. We learn new things from what we already know. So what we already know is existing as a network, and then we take this new input and relate it to that. It is not taken in as data, it is taken in like a story. So therefore, when it's taken as a story, these knowns get stored as patterns, and then the new things also keeps going and adding to the pattern. So our brain is very different in the sense it's a pattern making machine. Now, while forming all those patterns, it makes associations. The brain says, if this, then that, if this, then that, all those associations are made. That makes it very, very rapid when it comes to retrieval and usage of what is sitting there. We are rapid, okay? We can hit a break, okay? Almost the moment we see that the child has crossed the road and we are going too fast, and we can hit the brake. After a fraction of a second is when we actually realize that we have hit the brake. So where did that trigger of hitting the brake come from? It came from our lower center. It came from a pattern. It came from a quick retrieval system. The problem with the quick retrieval system is it can lead to biases in cognition, because we are not storing it as independent data, we're storing it as patterns. And if some of those patterns are somewhat flawed, then it leads to cognitive biases, because new information goes through those patterns. And unless we are deliberate and form new patterns, we are stuck in a cognitive bias loop. There are multiple cognitive biases. If you want to have a full view to all the cognitive biases, there's a beautiful book by Rolf Dobelli, which is called The Art of Thinking Clearly. But the cognitive biases which we took and talked about were a few, which were one, naive cynicism, which is suspecting others, imagining the worst in others. Then the second one is stereotyping for any group of people, doesn't matter. Okay. People who are corporate leaders are all like this. People who are NGO, this is all the NGO types. Teachers are all like this. Management is always like that. Or people from this part of the world are like this. People from this part of my country are like this. So any of those things is stereotyping. Or women are like this, men are like this, kids are like this. All of those stereotyping. Third one is about forming opinions based on limited information, rather than asking the question, what else do I need to make a decision, just to jump into conclusions based on what is available. And finally, the mother of all biases, which is called a confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is I have a certain pattern, and then I can only think through that particular pattern. That little game we played long time back, where I wrote the numbers 2, 4, 6, and 8. And I've used a logic, whatever logic I've used, guess the 5th and the 6th and the 7th term. All of us get stuck to 10, 12, 14, 10, 12, 14, 10, 12, 14. We can't go beyond that because we think it is even numbers, because we have deliberately wrote the even numbers. If you've forgotten the game, you can go back to that particular session and take a look at it. There are a few antidotes for cognitive biases. The antidote which I find as particularly very useful is skepticism. Skepticism is very different from cynicism. Okay, skepticism somehow has got a bit of a sense to the usage that it's like cynicism, it's by being suspicious or anything like that. Skepticism is not. Skepticism, by the way, is completely value neutral. Skepticism is when somebody says something, I don't accept it just at face value itself. I give it some kind of due diligence and say, does it seem right? Does it seem okay? I'm putting my cognition to work and accepting it after that. That is skepticism. The first is soak what is going on. Okay. Even in listening, one of the things we spoke about in listening was whenever somebody speaks, we are sort of rehearsing in our head as to what is the reply we are going to say, or we are going to say a side point, or we are going to add to that point. Instead, just be quiet and just listen and soak in whatever is happening. Don't take it necessarily at face value. Send it through your filters, very deliberate and clean filters, which you have thought of. Proper questioning process about our associations, because the mind is forming patterns and making those associations. Am I building a story here? Okay, because we form stories when none exist. Particularly with relationship where we have low trust, we start forming stories very, very quickly. Then it's about cutting some slack, giving a long rope to people, particularly people we don't particularly seem to trust too much. Give them some slack. Abraham Lincoln once famously said, I don't seem to like this person, which means I should be spending a lot more time with them. Okay. And then finally, there is no replacement for introspection, reflection, and thinking. And finally, in that thing is habits. Habits, there are a few characteristics of habits, which is they're super powerful. 2, they slowly creep up. They're very tough to acquire and even tougher to break. Good or bad habits. Good and bad is a value judgment. Any habit is very, very slow to acquire, even and quite hard to acquire, and even harder to break. And once we have got into a habit, from there, things are effortless. We don't even really feel it once we are in a habit, because strong habits are more lower center based, and therefore they just keep flowing. They just happen with no effort whatsoever. And these habits could be physical, or these could be mental habits. Physical habits in terms of our way we keep our body, exercise, sleep, nutrition, 3 big things when it comes to the physical body: rest, nutrition, and exercise. And mental processes, which is a whole bunch of things we have spoken before this. Now, how does a habit cycle look like? A habit cycle really starts with, we have repeated conscious thoughts. Okay, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. I always fail in interviews. Whenever I go for an interview, it doesn't seem to work. I don't know why in an interview I freeze and start asking that, and repeated conscious thoughts, repeated conscious thoughts. We are obsessing with a certain amount of repeated conscious thoughts. And once we have a large amount of repeated conscious thoughts, then it slowly becomes non-conscious and an automatic way of thinking. Because after that, we don't need effort. As soon as we get a situation, we can start feeling it automatically. We are not even thinking about it, but our anxiety levels have gone up, even though we haven't really thought about it. And with that, the non-conscious thoughts become a non-conscious way of being, a habitual way of being. Okay, and that gets hardwired into our brain, and that new things again start, which is our repeated conscious thoughts, and we keep going on this particular cycle. This is the cycle of habit. The way to break the cycle is straightforward, because we know how to get into a habit. It's exactly the same way we have to get out of habits as well. There is no magic formula to this. Exactly the same way one gets into habit is the same way one gets out of habits. Okay. Getting out of a habit is about, again, repeated conscious thoughts. Repeated conscious thoughts, which is coming from our higher center, which is coming from our willful mind. And then that repetition will lead to our habitual mind, the lower center, picking it up. And then the cycle continues, non-conscious way of being, which becomes a new attitude. And then that gets hardwired and we become the new person. So getting out of a habit and getting into the habit are exactly the same process. In one of them, we didn't want to get into it. We started thinking about it, consciously repeated conscious thoughts. In this case, we are deliberate about those repeated conscious thoughts and saying, I want to break this habit, which means I have to deliberately keep thinking about that particular thought. Then it becomes hardwired, and then it goes into a new person and everything else. So we spoke about this. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. In the interest of time, let's see how much time we have. My God. Okay. Okay. So therefore, reality is not the same for everyone, because reality comes through our sensory inputs, which goes through perception, and belief system, mindset, cognitive biases, habits, and everything else. And we form our reality. Our reality is not the reality, but it's our understanding of the reality. And just that appreciation itself can have a profound positive change. Which then brings us to external personal items. In external personal items, there are really 3 or 4, which is 1, finding flow, Ikigai, interpersonal relationship, and the strokes. Flow, Mihai 6 and Mihai talked about. On the one side, you have the level of challenge. On the other, you have your competence or your abilities. If your ability is very high and the level of challenge which you're given is very, very low, you get stuck in boredom, right? Or relaxation. If both are low, we are in apathy. We have no interest. But if our ability is not there and the challenge is very high, it takes us into anxiety. None of these 5 triangles or quadrilaterals is really the place we want to be. We want to be in these other 3, and ideally in this particular bright yellow quadrilateral. Now, those 3 are arousal or control. Control is where our challenge is not very high, our ability is very good. And then we go to a place where the challenge and our ability, the challenge is so good that we are able to leverage our full ability and get that sense of satisfaction. And that's called flow. I don't know if I mentioned it when we covered flow. I have seen and experienced that it's much easier to go to flow through the anxiety arousal into flow route rather than the relaxation, control, and flow, which means you give people a little more than they can handle. Particularly with your subordinates, give them a little more than what they can ideally handle. What you think they are capable of, give them a little more challenge than that. But don't let them sink, which is where the accountability comes in, which is where that refusing to blame comes in. Give them a responsibility which is a little more than what you think they can handle. When they are not yet ready, give it to them. But take the accountability with yourself. In case they fail, be there to say that, okay, I was the one who gave it. It's okay. I mean, this one didn't work. Maybe we can give it another shot. Okay. Then Ikigai. Ikigai is those 4 aspects, those 4 little circles: what the world needs, what you're good at, what will pay, whether it's tangible or intangible, and what you love. And the intersection of all of that is Ikigai. Then Anita had taken us through the various things on strokes. one of the slides which I kind of really held my attention was this one, which is, what do we do for doing, for being? What is that? Positive unconditional, positive conditional, negative conditional, and negative unconditional strokes. Okay, let's press on and go to professional and internal. In professional and internal, we have first, which is time management. Time management is a topic where plenty is being spoken about and written about time management, and lots of books are there. I don't want to go there in terms of, how do you, prioritize, how do you slice your time, Pomodoro technique, and this one and that one, how do you delegate and how do you prioritize and all those things. I just think of it this way, say that the only non-renewable resource we have is time. Okay. If the only non-renewable resource we have is time, then I can only act on things which are my priority. And therefore, it is about getting our priorities right is at the heart of time management. Doing things which are not my priority is wastage of time. It doesn't matter how well we do it, it's poor time management. It doesn't matter how quickly we do things which have no relevance to our life, it's bad time management. Okay, so asking, is it my priority? Is it aligned to my goal? It's important. Getting those things right is at the heart of time management. What happens is there's a whole bit of refresh which will get drop off, which means that we just have a few items which we have to handle, because the rest of it is either being delegated or either being taken away or being, we are going to defocus from all of those things. And that leaves us with only a few priorities. And usually there's plenty of time to take care of things which are our priority. We don't really need some great techniques other than some simple systems. Okay, so really understanding the line between what is my accept and I'm not going to do anything, and what are the things that I need to act on, and the wisdom is the one which guides that particular line. Okay. And my sincere request is, do not try to get things 100% right 100% of the time on 100% of the things, because you will spend a lot of time doing that, which means you will not be able to go into things which might be a priority and aligned. Okay, unless you have way too much time focusing on this, will not work at all, because we can't focus on all the other priority items which we have when we have multiple priorities. Pressure and stress. Stress is really what pressure is something everybody undergoes. Stress is something which is a choice. Do I choose to be stressed about that particular situation or not is a choice, and whether it stresses or not is a choice. Therefore, at some level, we can say, while pressure itself, all of us go through pressure. And every profession, trust me, tries to explain to anybody, somebody like me who kind of speak to all kinds of professionals, every professional group I meet, they will try and tell me why that particular profession is the most stressful job in the world. You talk to anybody, you talk to any profession, they will tell you why it is so stressful to be in that particular job. Okay, but trust me, most jobs have an element of stress in it, but it's not about stress. All jobs have a certain amount of pressure, deliverables, key, KRA, key result areas, and performance indicators and evaluations and time pressures. All of that is there in every job. How much we choose to get stressed, how do we manage our time, is at the core of how we manage our professional life internally. So stress is really our internal reaction to an external stimuli. And Viktor Frankl, Man's Life for Meaning, Man's Search for Meaning, in that book, he talks about between stimuli and response, there is a space. Okay, that's where our power to respond lies. After pressure and stress, it's about our critical thinking, Reclaiming our critical thinking is one of the key elements. We all know what is critical thinking. The ways to reclaim critical thinking, again, the most important tool you can have is skepticism. Can it be right? WhatsApp forwards come to us, hundreds of them every day. Just ask yourself this question when you hear or see anything extreme. Can this be right? Do you want to do a fact check on it? Not because you don't trust the person who sent it, but it seems so out that it probably needs a fact check. Okay, that is skepticism. Second thing about critical thinking is when we feed our mind with all kinds of data, random data, which keeps coming every 2 minutes, which is, call it news or call it headlines or call it breaking news or any of those things. Okay, most of them are fear feeders because that's what sticks. We know that from ants. And most news which comes on television or on a newspaper have to be bad news. Only then they will stick. Nobody is going to really like a news which says this particular rural school, which had only first generation learners, has a pass rate of 83%. Try writing that in a newspaper. It will be written in one tiny corner. Okay. And compare that with another news, which will be about killing somebody or lynching somebody or hitting somebody or burning something. Try and relate it to that news. The first one is a waste of a news from a newspaper's point of view. But the real thing is both are happening. Okay. And both are equally important to look at. So stay away from fear feeders like news. Confirmation bias, which is if I have a preset pattern, understand I have preset patterns, no matter how open-minded I am, I always have preset patterns, and therefore my understanding can be limiting and will be limited to the extent of my confirmation bias. Fourth is about seeking agency. The reason why this happened, is because of the chief minister or the prime minister or this one or that one. Taking one individual and thinking that they have we are being very, very unreal and giving too much power to one individual and thinking that individual can do so much. And two, we are just going into a very simplistic way of thinking. Most problems are more systemic in nature. Okay, I'm not saying individuals are not to be blamed, but most problems are more systemic in nature. And finally, give practice greater weight than eloquence. Articulation and eloquence is good, but give greater weightage to practice. Changing our beliefs, at least believing that our beliefs, all our understanding comes from our beliefs and our filters, is good for our critical thinking. And that will move us all the way to the most recent set of things we have spoken about, which is strategy, structure, systems. But before that, trust, empathy, and teamwork. Trust, it's about truly believing in that particular person with whom we are transacting at that moment. Okay, it's about taking difficult situations head on. It's about having a transparency. Okay, having the true sense of concern and accountability is all at the foundation of trust. Okay, do not grant trust too easily, but once it is granted, okay, truly trust, because trust is a tremendous time saver and a lubricant. Okay, because mistrust will create all those random systems. Okay, let's take the simple situation. If you think that when we are not in the school or when I'm not in my office, people are coming late, and I want to install a system that people have to punch in or punch out or any of those things. Imagine, I'm wasting a lot of money on systems which are wasteful expenses. Why? Because there's a low trust in the whole environment. If I just empower the people where they feel like I want to do it. It's not because I'm doing it because my boss Ramesh is not here. I want to do it because I'm doing it because I want to do it. That creates that trust, that empowerment. What happens is we don't need all those wasteful systems and processes which we set up. Okay. But trust also means that while we won't be suspicious at any point in time, but to suspend critical thinking, you can do it at your own risk. Empathy, it's about our ability to put ourselves in the shoes of others. And whenever, okay, there's empathy, feel the empathy. Don't be too eager to give solutions. Don't start relating to your own situation and don't try to solve the problem. Empathy is about being quiet. When there is an emotional outpouring, just shut up and wait. Not wait, listen. Okay, that's called empathetic listening. Empathetic listening is about just soaking in what the other person is saying and truly putting ourselves for that moment in the shoes of the others so that we are able to truly understand what they are trying to say. Thinking about what is that we are going to respond, thinking about solving the problem, thinking about giving solutions, and all of those things will disrupt the act of empathy. They're about teams. Just a random assembly of a group of people is not a team. Okay, a team has to have that sense of give and take. A team should always feel like if you're all together, we seem to be achieving more than what we are as individuals. Teams have tremendous trust. Teams have great shared value. Okay, all good teams, you will see they are trusting, they are happy group of people. They kind of feel like they have each other's back. Somebody falls, somebody is there to pick them up. Okay, it will, in a good trusting environment, it feels that people are just having fun. They're just being themselves, they're having fun. To the extent we'll sometimes wonder, how do they ever even get something done out here? Okay, that's how good teams work. Good teams are very, very happy families, very happy groups of people, and that's how teams work. Right. Then we come to our professional external. In professional external, there is a framework which has been developed, and that framework is what is called the McKinsey 7S model, which came out of what were the qualities which are common amongst many, many well-run American companies. The survey was done in America. It's suitable for any country. Yeah, it just happened that the two professors who did the study happened to be from, not two professors, the two consultants who did the study happened to be from the US. Okay, they kind of brought it down to some of the core principles, and we have gone through each of those principles. Just a quick word on each of those things, or a quick slide on each of them, which is the 3 hard S's, which is structure, strategy, structure and systems. Staff, style, shared values, and skills are all the softer S's, and shared values is the softest of them all and the toughest one to create as an organization. Strategic intent is having that big, hairy, audacious goal, a goal which we can never reach, a goal which is not a commitment, a goal which is an aspiration, a goal which is set there to fail, but it will spur us in that particular direction. Okay. Then the how do I go from my point of departure to my point of arrival is about the strategy. It is not one big catch-all phrase, but a very deliberate way in which I will achieve that particular goal is called the strategy. Then on structure, it outlines the various activities which are directed towards the goal and manning it appropriately, where no two people are doing the same thing, so they are mutually exclusive, but together as a whole team, they're completing the whole task, which is collectively exhaustive, which is again a principle of McKinsey, which is called MEES, which is a mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Then the third aspect about structure is about delegating. Every decision should be moved down to the lowest level at which it can be decided. I'm involved in every decision in my organization, is a bad idea. Okay, you're not being so responsible that you're in charge of every decision which is there. It simply means we are not delegating sufficiently. It simply means we are not trusting the team which is below us. It simply means we think we can do it better than anybody else. Okay, there is a certain amount of egocentricity which comes when everything is centralized. When you see over centralization or you feel the need for over centralization, ask yourself this question: where is this need coming from? It will normally come from ego. Keep all structures as clean as possible. Don't create roles unnecessarily, so that we can drive the strategy through the structure. If the structure is too unwieldy, you can't drive your strategy, because if we can't drive the strategy through the structure, we can't go towards our goal anyway. Okay. And finally, don't have too many direct reports, because direct reports, the boss is your HR. The HR department is for training purposes, it's for payroll, it is for doing employment engagement surveys, employee engagement surveys, and so on and so forth. That's the job of HR. The HR manager for every individual is their boss. Okay, and therefore it's very, very difficult for anybody to be an HR manager of more than 8 people and get to know more than 8 people intimately in a professional setting. Okay, there's only so much overlap time we have. Okay, in a professional setting, to get to know more than 8 people intimately in terms of HR needs is going to be difficult. So never have more than 8 direct reports. Even 8 is quite a lot. Systems and processes is, again, it's about things which make our life easy. Okay, so the actual act, the actual execution is done through systems and processes. Where we have seen any effective system has to either simplify or be able to save time and money, or be able to give better control. But ideally, you want all good systems to simplify, save time and money, and get better control. Okay, for those of us who are in Bangalore, you've seen those little orange, on the road, we have this divider. There's a bus lane and a car lane. Now, half of them, it's probably a very good system. Okay, but the execution of that system has been such that it's gone to a place where on the bus lane, all cars and two-wheelers can go, including the buses. On this lane, all buses. So we're back to a chaotic way of doing it. The reason is in terms of our execution, in terms of how we thought about the system, how we implemented the system, what are the controls which are there in that particular system, and what is the penalty if somebody doesn't follow the system, and how will the system age with time. So system is not coming up with one fancy idea and say, hey, let's put the system in place. It's about, remember that, right? I mean, the two ways of thinking. One is a more integrated systems approach. The other one is the reductionist approach, which is in terms of thinking of parts. Systems is a very, very different kind of thinking. A good system ideally should have all these qualities. If you get those 3 pieces right, then we can come to the core, which is the shared value. I'm not spending much time on skill, staff, and style because those are fairly straightforward SS. Then we come to shared values. Shared values is usually the toughest one to build. And most organizations, when they have a shared value problem, when there is low trust, they will try and address it through a system, which will only make things worse. A shared value problem has to be recognized upfront. A set of common behavioral traits and a common set of values is about shared values. These are not things which we feel good about, write it on a piece of paper, blow it up, and then stick it in various parts in our school or our organization or our institution. It is not about that. It's about how we walk. Okay, it's a behavioral thing. We have to be following and flowing with that. And walking the talk is more important. Some amount of communication has to be done. And shared vision is felt by everyone who comes into touch with the organization. So whenever you ask somebody, what do you think about DHL? Okay, or what do you think about FedEx? There's something which immediately comes to your mind. That's a strong shared value of FedEx. And when you see it in movement, shared value is stationary as a list of things. When you see it in movement, it's called culture. Culture of a society, culture of your apartment complex, culture of your school, culture of your department, culture of everything is basically shared values in action is culture. Which kind of brings us, I think, to the last slide, I don't know, which is communication, Communication is really not about articulation. It's not about vocabulary. It is not about any of those things. First, it's about being who we are. I mean, we cannot be communicating effectively if we are anything different from who we are. The authenticity is important. The second one is about setting up the logic. It's about the storytelling. It's about breaking it into pieces. It's about saying this flows from this, flows from this to this. Okay. In the third one is to be able to relate to the other person when we are doing that particular communication. In logic, there is a small trick I kind of saw somewhere, which says that if logic is not your strong suit, say what is the final point you are trying to convey. Okay. And then build the supporting evidences, so to speak, rather than, because good storytellers will start with something, there is a suspense, there are connections, and finally there is an aha. If you're not good at that, just say that, you know what, I don't think we should do this. I don't think this particular way of expanding that particular unit we want to set up is something we want to do. Reasons being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we state upfront what is that we want to communicate, and then line up the reasons below rather than taking through a certain story, but do that authentically. A quick test for authenticity is, are you pretty much the same person in every situation? Okay, if you're slightly, we won't be exactly the same person in every situation. Are you pretty much the same person in every situation? Is about authenticity and empathy, we all know. So this is really what we have done. So these are the 4 things, and all of that is guided and driven by our central chip, Intel Insight. I copied this from Intel Insight, by the way, without giving credits, and I put neuroplasticity inside. Yeah. Thank you. That's a whole load I tried to do in, well, I've taken forever. I think I've taken close to 80 minutes. Yeah, thank you. So happy to take questions, happy to take, yeah, anything.
Ramesh, it was like a marathon race of revision for our board exams. I thoroughly enjoyed. I didn't blink, and when we were listening to all that revision sessions, we could connect especially to ants, and the McKinsey 7S model. Then there are certain things which touches you internally. So it was an amazing session. We were revising, and now we are going to appear for the board exams. It actually felt like a student.
Yeah,
it was really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really didn't know how to go about it because there's so much to cover, and I went through all that and I said, how will I put it all together in 60-80 minutes? As you can see, I went from one slide to the other. Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is like going.
I wrote few slides, but after that, I could not write. Then I thought I'll request Mary, for this recording at least to be uploaded.
No. All the recordings, Lalita, will be sent. So we have to send every one of them. The least we can do is send you all the 24 recordings which are there.
Thank you.
Okay, every one of them will be sent, including this one. This is the 24th session we are having.
Yes.
And post this, we are still working out what we need in Embody. I'm fairly clear about 3 or 4 things we need to have. One is I wanted Vasant, who's one of the people in Yogakshema. I wanted Vasant to talk to everyone about nutrition. He's a yoga practitioner. He's a master's from IIT Kharagpur. He was working in a chip manufacturing company and all that. I think, or no, he was in telecom. I can't remember now. And then he decided to become a yoga practitioner. He grows his own food. He lives here only near Kengeri. And yeah, he does, he and his wife, Lalita, both of them are practitioners of that. I mean, so when Vasant speaks, he speaks very, very quietly, softly, unless a little more brashish, kind of a talker like me, coming from a corporate background. So he talks a lot more softly, but he comes from a place of authenticity, unbelievable practitioner. So I've spoken to Vasant. I told him, you have to do at least 2 sessions for us. one on nutrition and one on exercise, just to give us the context. Okay, not necessarily to talk about how do we take care of our physical body, right? Because all the three things, sleep hygiene, nutrition, and exercise, are critical for our physical body, because if our physical body is not in good shape, then our mental body is not going to be in great shape either. I mean, it's very difficult to achieve that. Okay. So for us to have the right kind of thoughts, right kind of feelings, and right kind of all stuff, we need to get that part of it right. In the mental part, we will talk about things like attitude of gratitude, Tal Benchars ideas, about the kindness, how it works. Even gratitude, it works very differently from the way we imagine normally. So those are things we will talk about. We will probably not have 12 sessions in Embody. We will probably have 6 or 8, but we will decide that and let you know. That will start in about a month and a half time. I plan to take a break, proper break. My math sessions are done. My Yogakshema session is done. And I have 2 talks with 2 schools on 15th, 16th, and 17th. With that, I'm going to take a full, clean 1-month break. Yeah.
How are the teachers taking the math sessions forward?
Pretty decent, I think. So, Lita, we started, as always, a lot of people register, right? And we are also very clear that we don't want to charge for these sessions because people have to get inspired. And therefore, we don't want to say, oh, if you charge, then people will take it more seriously and stuff like that. Maybe people will, but I don't want to use a stick approach.